are there different examples of countries over the last few years and all over the world that have instituted certain types of these kind of controls and filters? And do we feel that those things are necessary? And do we feel that those are the type of things that, as users, we should somewhat willingly at least hand over to the government? If not, where do we draw that line?
Yeah, so it's tricky. Like, a lot of people would look at certain governments and they characterize them as authoritarian or very aggressive in terms of their policing of peoples. But the reality is, you know, London is one of the most surveilled cities in the world.
All
right?
the CCTV
cameras.
cameras.
They have more CCTV cameras, I think, per capita than any city in the world. And this is true in New York, DC. I lived in DC. There's cameras everywhere. And so it's true to a certain extent that we've already given up so many of these concepts of freedom and so much private information that we don't even realize, I think, to a certain extent, what the effects of that will be. And so, yeah, I think as society, we definitely need to take into account the freedoms we have already given away. But now, as we're looking at these things retroactively, it's not just about us as the data providers or the government as the eventual user, but there's these companies in between. And I think the question of fintech is, what is the moral obligation of those companies in the middle in terms of protecting that data, in terms of, and I think it comes back to a fundamental question. Do we own the right to our own private data, right? I think that's why the distributed ledger and blockchain, I think, are so appealing to many people, is the idea that private data is one of the biggest and most important commodities in the world right now. And yet we individuals who the data is about, we have no control over who uses it, who sees it, who sells it, et cetera. And so I think you know, these are the types of things we have to figure out as society.
And I think those arguments and debates that you rightly described that as societies we need to figure out, I think apply not just for fintech, which of course they do, but as well as other advances we're making in technology, particularly like in biotechnology. So if we think about the commercialization of DNA testing,
yeah,
and as you provide different samples to companies so they can check your family's history or health, you know, markers in your DNA, there's a lot of debate and questions about, hey, once you hand that over to these companies, who actually owns that DNA at that point?
Yeah.
Because that is so uniquely yours, yet can you hand that over to somebody else? And again, that's a very similar situation to what you had described before about we sign up for apps ignorantly, in an ignorant way of not understanding what rights we're giving. And similarly, in these kind of DNA tests and other types of kind of biotechnology, kind of commercial kind of projects that are going on, you know, there's a lot of ignorance around, hey, what are you actually giving up to these companies?
Well, that's a great tie-in actually to this Apple case, because in the state of California, right, there's that great case where the guy, they had this unsolved serial killer case, and the police for decades didn't know who this guy was. And then he takes one of these blood tests, or it wasn't a blood test, but he did a DNA test, sends it in, didn't realize that the data that was produced wasn't going to be private, and it ended up on a public database. And that data from his DNA was actually used to find him and capture him as a serial killer. So many people in society were debating this issue. They're saying, on the one hand, they were super excited that you have this, like, you know, murderer. Yeah, he's off the streets, right? And he's been caught. But the flip side is they're like, how did they get his information? How did they know it was him? Because he put this information up and didn't realize that it could lead to exactly identifying him as the killer. And so I think this is this is the dichotomy that we face now, is that, you know, the utilization of smartphone technology and all these technologies has opened up so many avenues in life that we've never been able, communication and, you know, financial transactions and data and knowledge and so many cool things, but we are simultaneously ourselves becoming the product, and I don't think we really understand the repercussions of that yet.